grew up in Florida. So I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I've spent a little bit of time there. So I went to undergrad. I was at Columbia University in New York. Love New York. Manhattan is definitely such a unique place. And then from there, I ended up working at Microsoft in Seattle. And then from Seattle, I went down to the Bay Area. So I basically kind of circled around each of the four corners of the US, entirely avoiding the middle. But maybe one day I'll make it to Chicago or something. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me, what I've been doing. Outside of work, I'm a big fan of basketball. I like to play basketball. I'm a Miami Heat fan, being from Florida. So now I'll kind of go into a little bit of my experiences. So I'll start off with high school. So, when I was in high school, and I think that's probably where most of you are at right now, I actually didn't do any computer science work. I actually didn't even know how to program. I think during this time, there was an AP computer science class that was offered late into my experience in high school, but I actually never even took it. So I had no exposure to computer science in high school. So I think that you all, by virtue of doing this program, are well ahead of the curve. So I think that's actually really amazing that you all already have exposure so early. I think that's really, really going to be great. But in high school, what I kind of was doing activity-wise is I was part of the debate team. I really enjoyed doing that. I would travel on kind of one of the circuits, like both in Florida, but also nationally. I like to do science research, and I also like to run. So I was doing cross country in my free time. And my favorite classes in high school were physics, and then this one called human geography, which kind of, and I'll talk a little bit about both how, kind of my interest in high school led to some of my experiences in college. But in high school, I think, one of the learnings I had about, for those, sophomores and maybe like even juniors and seniors in high school, I think one of the learnings I had is that it's important to explore various opportunities and keep stretching yourself. I think, for me, like, doing debate and public speaking was important, but also kind of, going deep into physics and kind of, doing labs and that type of stuff and focusing on schoolwork. But, there's different ways to stretch yourself. And I think that, what you all are doing here is definitely one of them as well. Another one is working on passion projects. I think I've never regretted any passion project that I've worked on in my own time. I think this is a great way to learn new skills and also to have a lot of fun and meet new people. So I think, there's a lot of people who are part of this program. So it's a great opportunity to find potential people to work on passion projects with. And then also another learning was talking to college students and recent graduates. So I think it's never too early to kind of, talk to people who are a little bit above you to kind of learn more about what the next steps can be for you. So now we'll talk a little bit about my time as undergrad. So I was at Columbia University. I actually came into college and I started by majoring in mechanical engineering. This is because I really loved physics as an undergrad, as a high schooler. Like that was actually kind of one of my passions and my reason for going to engineering school even. But then I kind of quickly realized that although I liked mechanical engineering at a conceptual level, I was really bad with my hands. So I wasn't super good at building things physically, and all the engineering and physics labs, etc. I realized that I'm much better at kind of more of like abstraction and working on, topics more, a little bit less like, physically, like stuff with your hands and more conceptual, which kind of led me to computer science. Because computer science is something where even though you're working at a conceptual level and, thinking about logic, you're still able to have a lot of impact. And then also, I talked about, like I was interested in human geography. This actually led me to also go into economics. So I did both a major in economics and a major in computer science and a minor in economics at Columbia. And at college, I think one of the things that I most cherished were some of the activities I did. So one was research. So I really enjoyed doing this. There was this lab called the Wireless and Mobile Networking Lab that I was fortunate to be a part of. And over here, I kind of worked on basically, I kind of like the Internet of Things. So visualizing a bunch of devices that are wirelessly connected to each other and kind of showing how they're communicating to each other with this algorithm. So I was working with PhD students and a professor, and that was like a really great experience that kind of shaped me a little bit. And another one was working at this lab called the Tadinetty Lab at Columbia in the medical center. So over here, what they were focused on was using big data to improve healthcare. So I would kind of write reports about, how people are, using AI to mine FDA reports to like kind of learn the interactions between drugs, et cetera. So these types of, research activities, I think were really important to me. And I definitely recommend, if you're interested when you enter college, like, looking into research, it's kind of, there's a lot of labs, no matter what college you go to, there's lots of professors and researchers and grad students who, even as an undergrad, you can partner with and do really cool things. Another thing I did was being like an intro CS section leader. So this was something, and it seems like, if you enjoy teaching and talking to others, it was really fun to kind of talk. And this has happened more when I was an upperclassman, where I would kind of help out some of the freshmen and sophomores kind of explore their passion for computer science. And also I did some internships. I'll talk a little bit in the coming slides about how I was able to find internships, but did them at some companies. And then my favorite classes, so I think one was Intro to Python. So I think, having the intro programming class, and you guys are probably, you all have probably already done this type of stuff. But I remember one of the first projects I worked on was basically using a nearest neighbor algorithm to find out whether or not a cell was malignant or benign. So this really kind of was when my, it lit a spark in me, and I realized that, wow, computer science and software and AI can have such a big impact on so many different fields, including medicine and healthcare. And that's kind of been one of my driving motivators throughout my life since, and taking machine learning and also thinking about AI and safety ethics was also, a really good experience for me. So I'll share now a little bit about my learnings. So, some of the learnings I've had from undergrad. So one was basically, the importance of starting broad and then diving deep into your interests. And I think there's many ways to dive deep. So one of which is internships. So this is something I did, and I definitely recommend if you have the ability to do it. So during undergrad, working at different companies, getting a little bit of a taste of the real world, and then deciding, okay, do I like this? Do I not like this? Was really useful for me. Doing research, as I mentioned, was a big part of my experience. And then also classes. So I think, undergrad is a time when you probably have to take a lot of classes, especially right when you get in. So, taking things you're interested in. So at Columbia, we actually had this thing called the core, where I had to take a lot of humanities classes as well. And for me, I really enjoyed doing that. But yeah, so I think, trying to shape your, there's many other ways too. So there's clubs and activities you can get involved in. So, every university has a lot of clubs. So kind of joining a club or even starting a club in college can be a great way to dive deep into your interests. Another learning I had from undergrad is that it's really important to form a solid foundation in whatever you do. So I think by having a solid foundation, it can set you up for success in more specialized disciplines. So what this means is that, it's really sometimes, I think undergrad is one of the best times to really dive deep and have a solid understanding of whatever you're studying. So if you want to go into public policy, having a really fundamental understanding of I don't know, whatever, the law and maybe a couple, writing, etc. is important. In the case of engineering, or machine learning, which is what I actually ended up pursuing, I think having engineering fundamentals is really important. So I think, understanding computer science, understanding how things work at, various levels of the stack was really important, I think long term. So, and also math. So having a good sense of math and kind of really understanding the fundamentals and having this solid foundation can allow you to, even if you want to do machine learning, have an impact as a machine learning researcher later. So yeah, I think having very foundational knowledge in whatever you're studying is important. And then lastly, I think, have fun. I think, if you're not having fun doing any of this, there's so many things to study and there's so many interesting projects and majors. And I think, you should always be asking in the back of your head, am I having fun? Because I think that's also super important, because if you're having fun, you're also going to be working more and it'll feel more natural. So I think that's also a good thing to have in mind. So, now I'm going to talk a little bit about, what I wish I knew about applying to jobs and internships. So, when I was doing it, I kind of had a very scattered approach. But I think looking back, I think, the step one is really to build your resume and your experiences. So one thing is kind of like this problem where to get a job, you need a prior job. This is commonly known as kind of, one of those large problems out there. And the way you kind of get over this is by having projects. So, you can list projects on your resume. For example, you may have built something really cool at Inspirit AI, or in your own free time using, some open source tutorials that you took it upon yourself to learn. So I think, definitely try to list those, past internships if you've had any, classes, clubs that you've been a part of. I'm sure you all probably have heard all about this, but I think that's probably the first step. And the second step is to find roles that excite you. So there's different ways you can go about this. One of which is there's all these websites that your college will have, things like Handshake. There's going to be a college career center. If you're interested in startups, there's some really cool websites like AngelList, which specifically allow you to find those startups. And then also, there's websites, but there's also connections, which I think is also sometimes underrated, but equally important. So this is going to mean alumni. So people who have kind of been in a similar spot to you, your fellow students. It could be people in your own year. It could be people in the years above you. And then also kind of just cold emailing other people and just kind of learning about what they do. I think a great thing to do is to just email folks and say, what do you do? And people are usually very happy to chat. So doing all these, so this is like kind of finding what excites you. And then lastly, kind of, applying and interviewing. I think one thing I'll say is don't be disheartened by rejection. I think it's important to learn from every experience. I think, everybody I know has been rejected from so many places, especially when applying, I guess, to college, but also to applying to like jobs and internships. I think it's a part of life, and it's important to not be disheartened, to kind of stay persistent. And it's really hard, I think, when you're a freshman, but I think it gets easier over time as long as you kind of keep building out your skill set and your experiences. So now I'll talk a little bit about my first job. So I talked about, my experience at Columbia, what I did over there. So I ended up doing a lot of engineering internships in undergrad. I really enjoyed it, but I also wanted to kind of work on my, some non-technical aspects for myself. So I thought it would be a good fit to kind of go into more of a program/product management role at Microsoft. So where I was working on Office 365. One of my favorite projects when I was at Microsoft was basically creating a plan to use ML and AI to improve data center operations for Office 365. So Office 365, I'm sure you all have probably used Microsoft Word, Excel, etc. So this is one of Microsoft's products. And all of these emails, for Outlook are actually stored on machines and data centers across the world because it's a very global product. So what I was doing was thinking about how to improve the data center operations. So these are operations that keep the machines running that allow you to access your email. So if you use Outlook, this is actually kind of what I was helping to maintain. And one of my favorite experiences at Microsoft was actually, having the opportunity to travel abroad. So it was really fun to be able to go to Suzhou, which is a city in China. And I was working over there for a few weeks with the engineering team because we had a lot of engineers from China on my team. So it was kind of cool having that very global experience. And some of the learnings I had from there is that, patience is key. It was kind of like when I first joined, it was drinking from a fire hose is the kind of expression. There was lots of new terminology, really cool things happening, but there was so much of it. So it was just really taking time to learn and being patient, being a sponge and just absorbing everything and getting better over time. And also another kind of fun thing I had the opportunity to do, and I would encourage everybody to do, whether it's at their first job, club, undergrad, etc., is to kind of learn from other teams. So what I would do is I would actually kind of talk to people on other teams, listen to some of the talks that they have. And, for me, I was always passionate about AI. So I would learn a lot about, how, they were using AI. So for example, in Office 365, one of the ways they're using AI is for things like sentence completion. So Adam, if you're typing an email, you might notice that sometimes it will complete your email. And the way they're doing this is through natural language processing. So learning a little bit about how they want to do, how they're doing this, how they're kind of building these models, hosting these models, etc., was kind of a good experience for me, and something that was a key learning. And yeah, so I mean, that was a little bit about Microsoft. I was living in Seattle at this point in time, and then I realized that I kind of wanted to dive deeper into machine learning, so I actually ended up going to graduate school. So I ended up doing a program. So I was doing the MSCS program, so Masters in Computer Science, focused on machine learning and AI at Stanford. So at Stanford, I ended up having the opportunity to do research in the Stanford Machine Learning Group. This is Professor Andrew Yang's lab, and at the what we were focused on was really improving or using AI to improve healthcare. And some of the highlights of my experience at Stanford were meeting students who are interested in using AI to improve society. I think you all are also lucky to have each other, since you all are probably similarly interested students who want to use AI to improve society. I think that was a highlight for Stanford. I think that's probably also going to be a highlight of your experience in high school by being part of this program. Another one was publishing papers in ML conferences and being a part of the AI for Health community at Stanford. So these are a lot of people who are really interested in using AI to improve health. So that was definitely a highlight. And then the other one was teaching others about AI. So I think that, I think one of the best ways to learn concepts is to teach others. So for me, this kind of meant being a TA for machine learning, which was kind of one of the big courses at Stanford, and then also a TA for the smaller course called AI for disease diagnosis. So, teaching is important. So I think that, if I have one recommendation for it to like really solidify some of the stuff you've learned over the past year, I would encourage you to try teaching, maybe your mom, maybe your little brother or little sister, try to teach them about AI, what you've learned. And if you start a club, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of teach your classmates who may not have had the chance to kind of do this program, or have had the chance to kind of, or may not have previously even known they were interested in it. Because I think by teaching others, you're able to really solidify concepts for yourself. And you even realize what you're shaky in. So another thing, so at Stanford, I'll talk a little bit about some of the AI for health projects I was working on. So one was something called Backfinder. So basically this was a project where I was basically, creating computer vision models to search through pathology slides and find a certain type of bacteria that would help pathologists detect tuberculosis earlier. Another kind of, area of research was natural language processing in medicine. So there was two projects I worked on, both of which have been published, that really focused on extracting information from medical reports to then use this to kind of assist with other downstream modeling tasks. And then lastly, like automated chest X-ray diagnosis. So, all of this stuff I've kind of said, or the previous point, sounds a little bit abstract, but really the goal of kind of what my research was at Stanford was really about improving our ability to, make decisions based on, to make decisions based on chest X-rays. So this could be like, if you have a chest X-ray, we can automatically check if there's pneumonia using a model. So in a lot of parts of the world, there's a scarcity of radiologists. So this is kind of very key to making health more accessible across the world. And that was kind of one of the values and passions that I've had. And, so that, yeah, how can AI improve healthcare is a little bit of, was kind of my more specialized focus in grad school. Yeah, so I mean, I think I took you a little bit through the journey of myself. So, how I started off not knowing much about AI in high school at all, or computer science for that matter, randomly getting interested into it in college, doing some internships, working at Microsoft, and then going and doing research at Stanford. And yeah, so I think there's many different types of careers in AI. So some of which are going to be things like software engineering, data science, product management, and there's going to be new emerging careers like AI ethicists, about different types of companies, and AI legislators. Yeah, and I think that it's very important that we all think about how AI can have a positive impact. So for example, there's all these tricky scenarios that come up that I'm sure you all have kind of grappled with in the past. But I would encourage you to keep thinking about, because I think a lot of this will actually come into play when you all start entering the workforce. So by kind of taking the time right now to really understand and have points of view, I think you'll be ahead of the curve when these technologies actually start having a lot of impact in reality. So now I'll talk a little bit about some questions that I'll just go through. So what is AI research like? So for me, AI research is really a combination of like ideation, thinking about a problem that's important, and then trying to find data to help you solve that problem, and building models, and then iteratively improving the data, improving the models, and kind of making sure that the use case aligns with the stakeholders. So I think AI research is a very interdisciplinary thing, especially depending on what you're building. So in healthcare, it is very interdisciplinary. This is probably something that's on your minds. So I think there's a lot of different ways that high school students can prepare. One of which is taking time to kind of build your own projects. There's a lot of open source materials online for how to learn Python, how to build models. I would encourage you all, especially at the high school level, to really focus on the fundamentals. So I would say this is stuff like kind of learning math. So a lot of this machine learning is actually built on mathematical principles, and also having good engineering logic. And basically, if you're interested in computer science, diving deep into that. And then also, of course, the modeling part and the AI part, and understanding data sets, how to get data sets, what types of problems AI can solve. These are all good things to think about to prepare.